Cade Ashworth had not slept a full night in 10 years. He ruled the Blackthorn pack from a stone castle on a hill, and every wolf in the valley below called him a strong leader. They admired the way he settled disputes, protected the borders, and kept his people safe. What they did not know was that their king spent most nights standing at his window, staring at the dark forest, waiting for a feeling in his chest that never went away. That feeling was the bond. 10 years ago, on the night he was supposed to be joined with his fated mate, a quiet young woman named Elara, she had disappeared. There had been no warning, no note, no goodbye. One moment she was standing beside him in the great hall, her hand trembling in his, and the next moment she was gone, slipping away into the trees while everyone celebrated. At first, Cade had believed she would come back. Mates did not simply leave one another. The bond between them was supposed to grow stronger with time, not weaker. But the days became weeks, and the weeks became years, and still she never returned. He searched every village, questioned every traveler, and sent his most trusted scouts across 3 territories. Each time a lead turned cold, something in him grew a little harder. Some of his advisors told him to move on. A king needed an heir, they said, and holding on to a woman who had abandoned him made him look weak. Cade never listened. He could still feel her, faint and far away, like a heartbeat behind his own. As long as he could feel that, he refused to believe she was truly lost to him. The oldest wound in Cade's life, apart from Elara's disappearance, was his pack's long conflict with the Red Fang pack, led by Alpha Draven. The 2 packs had been enemies since before Cade was born, but the fighting had grown worse after a raid years ago that took the lives of Cade's younger brother and several of his warriors. Cade blamed Draven for that loss, and the bitterness between the 2 leaders had never healed. So when one of his scouts came to him with news of a hidden safe house near the border of Red Fang territory, rumored to shelter spies working for Draven, Cade did not hesitate. He gathered a small group of trusted warriors and rode out himself, ignoring the advice of his council, who thought it beneath a king to lead such missions personally. The safe house stood alone at the edge of a quiet forest, half hidden by tall pines. It looked ordinary from the outside, just a small wooden cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. Cade's warriors surrounded it quietly, and on his signal, they moved in. What Cade found inside changed everything. There was no gathering of spies, no hidden weapons, no secret plans spread across a table. Instead, there was a woman standing protectively in front of a young boy, her arms spread wide, as if she could shield him from an entire pack of warriors, with nothing but her own body. Cade's breath caught in his throat. He knew that face. Older now, thinner, with new lines of worry around her eyes, but it was unmistakably her, Elara. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The warriors behind Cade shifted uneasily, unsure what to do, while the boy peeked out from behind Elara's legs, his small face pale with fear. He looked to be about 8 years old, with dark hair and sharp green eyes that seemed strangely familiar. Elara, Cade finally said, his voice rough. 10 years of searching, 10 years of unanswered questions, all rushing into that single word. She did not run this time. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at him, though her arms never left their protective position in front of the child. "You will not touch him," she said firmly. "I don't care who you think he is or what you think you know. He is a child, and he has done nothing wrong." Cade's eyes moved to the boy again, taking in the details he had missed at first glance, the shape of his jaw, the particular shade of green in his eyes. It was like looking at a smaller, softer version of a face Cade knew all too well. "Whose son is he?" Cade asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Elara's chin lifted. "He is Draven's son." The name hit the room like a stone dropped into still water. Cade's warriors tensed, hands moving toward their sides out of old habit, but Cade raised a hand to stop them. His eyes never left Elara's face. "You are protecting the son of the man responsible for my brother's death," he said slowly, trying to understand. "I am protecting a child," Elara corrected him, her voice steady, despite the fear he could see trembling just beneath the surface. "A child is not responsible for what his father did. He didn't choose his family any more than you or I chose ours." Cade studied her for a long moment, something about her certainty, The way she stood without flinching even though she was clearly afraid reminded him of the woman he had once known, the one who used to speak softly for those who had no voice of their own. He had almost forgotten that part of her. "Why did you leave?" he finally asked, the question that had haunted him for a decade finally leaving his lips. 10 years, Ilara. 10 years of searching, of not knowing if you were alive or safe. Why?" For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. She glanced at the boy, then gently guided him to sit near the fireplace before turning back to Cade, lowering her voice so only he and his closest warriors could hear. "I overheard your counsel the night of our joining ceremony," she said. "They were planning to use me. There was an envoy from Red Fang attending the celebration as part of an early peace attempt, one your father had arranged before he passed. Some of your advisors wanted to use the ceremony as cover to have the envoy quietly removed, to end any hope of peace and push you further into war. They planned to make it look like an accident during the celebration and to make certain that if anything went wrong, I would take the blame as an outsider with no family to protect her." Cade felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's not possible. My council would never." "They would, and they did," Ilara said quietly. "I heard them planning it myself, hidden in the hallway outside the meeting room. I was terrified. I didn't know who to trust, and I was afraid that if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, or worse, that telling you would put you in danger too. So I ran. I thought if I disappeared, the plan would fall apart without me there to be blamed, and maybe the envoy would survive, and maybe you would be safer without a mate they could use against you." Cade was silent for a long moment, memories rearranging themselves in his mind. He remembered now, faintly, whispers among his advisors in the weeks after Ilara vanished, quiet arguments about a plan that had failed before it could begin. He had been too consumed by grief and anger to pay attention at the time. Now the pieces were falling into place in a way that made his stomach turn. "And the boy?" he asked, nodding toward where the child sat quietly, watching the adults with wide, careful eyes. "I found him 3 years ago," Ilara said, her voice softening. "There was a small conflict along the northern border, nothing you were involved in, a dispute between minor packs. His mother was killed, and in the chaos, no one realized who his father was until it was too late to matter to the people who might have used that knowledge against him. I found him alone in the woods, hiding, terrified. I couldn't leave him there. I didn't care whose blood ran in his veins. He was just a scared little boy who needed someone." Cade looked at the child again, this time seeing not an enemy's son, but simply a child who had lost his mother and had been raised in hiding ever since, protected by a woman who had given up everything to keep both herself and him safe. "You could have told me," Cade said quietly. "Once you found him, you could have come to me." "And risk you seeing only Draven's face when you looked at him?" Ilara asked. "I couldn't take that chance. Not after everything." Cade's warriors shifted behind him, and one of them, an older wolf named Garrick who had served Cade's father before him, stepped forward. "My king, the boy is valuable. If Draven learns his son is alive, we could use this to force a favorable peace, or at the very least, protect our borders for years." Ilara's arms tightened protectively around the boy's shoulders as he came to stand beside her again. "He is not a bargaining tool," she said sharply. "I will not allow it." Cade looked between his loyal warrior and the woman he had spent 10 years searching for, feeling the weight of the choice in front of him. For years, his entire purpose had narrowed down to 2 things: finding Ilara, and someday making Draven pay for what had happened to his brother. Now both of those things stood in front of him, tangled together in a way he never could have imagined, and he realized that holding on to his anger would mean betraying the very thing he had searched so long to find. "No," Cade said finally, his voice firm. "We are not here to take a child as leverage. We are not here to punish a boy for a war he had no part in starting." He turned to Garrick. "Stand down, all of you. We return home, and we return without harming anyone in this house." Garrick looked as though he wanted to argue, but the look on Cade's face told him this was not a decision open for discussion. Slowly, the warriors lowered their stances and stepped back toward the door. Cade turned back to Ilara. "I am not the same man who let his council whisper him into hatred without question," he said. I don't know yet how deep this betrayal goes, but I intend to find out, and I am not going to let you disappear again." Ilara's eyes filled with tears. She had clearly been holding back for a long time. "I never wanted to leave you," she admitted softly. "Every day for 10 years, I have felt this ache, like something missing that I couldn't name. I told myself it was worth it, to keep you safe, to keep him safe, but it never stopped hurting." "Then let it stop now," Cade said, closing the distance between them. "Come home, both of you." The boy looked up at Ilara with uncertain eyes, and she knelt down to his level, speaking softly to him, explaining as gently as she could that they would be safe now, that the tall man with the serious face was not someone to fear. The journey back to Blackthorn territory was quiet, filled with the kind of tension that comes after a storm has passed, but before anyone is quite ready to trust the calm. Cade rode beside Ilara the entire way, unwilling to let her out of his sight even for a moment, while the boy sat wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the unfamiliar landscape roll past with wide, curious eyes. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the pack, and Cade knew there would be difficult conversations ahead, questions from his council that would need honest answers, and the slow, careful work of rebuilding trust with a mate who had every reason to believe she couldn't fully rely on him. He also knew that news of a living heir would eventually reach Draven, and that whatever came next between the two packs would be complicated in ways neither leader could fully predict. But for the first time in 10 years, Cade felt something other than the ache of searching. As he watched Ilara settle the sleepy boy into a warm bed that first night in the castle, he understood that the family he had been chasing for so long had never truly been lost. It had simply been waiting, hidden and protected, for the moment when love could finally be stronger than the old wounds that had shaped them both. The following morning brought the first real test of what Cade had promised. He called his council together in the Great Hall, the same room where Ilara had vanished 10 years before, and asked every advisor present a single question: who among them remembered the plan involving the Red Fang envoy on the night of his joining ceremony? At first, silence filled the hall. No one wanted to meet his eyes. Then Garrick, the same warrior who had argued for using the boy as leverage, stepped forward with a heavy sigh and admitted that he had known. He explained that the plan had come from a small group of older advisors, most of whom had since passed away or left the pack, men who believed that lasting peace with Red Fang was impossible and that ending it before it began would save future generations from years of fighting. Garrick had disagreed with the plan at the time, but he had also stayed silent, afraid of dividing the pack during an already difficult moment. Cade listened to every word without interrupting, his jaw tight but his voice calm when he finally spoke. He told his council that fear and silence had cost him 10 years with his mate, and that such secrecy would no longer be tolerated in his court. From that day forward, he said, decisions that touched the safety of the pack, and especially decisions that touched innocent lives, would be brought into the open, discussed honestly, and never again hidden behind closed doors. It was not a perfect resolution. Some advisors grumbled quietly about a king who listened too closely to an outsider's word over his own counsel, but most of the pack, when they heard the full story, felt only relief that the truth had finally come to light, and a quiet respect for a king willing to admit his own blindness. Ilara, for her part, spent those early weeks slowly relearning how to trust the castle that had once nearly cost her everything. She spent her days with the boy, whose name, she told Cade one evening, was Finn, given to him by his mother before she died. Finn was shy at first, flinching at loud noises and staying close to Ilara's side wherever she went, but the warmth of the pack and the patience of the servants who quickly grew fond of him slowly coaxed a smile onto his face. News did eventually reach Draven that his son was alive. It came not through a threat or a demand, but through a careful, respectful message sent by Kade himself, explaining everything Ilara had told him and offering safe passage for a meeting, should Draven wish for one. The message made no mention of past grievances and asked for nothing in return except honesty. Draven's reply took weeks to arrive, and when it did, it was short and guarded, but it did not refuse the offer. Whatever came of that fragile first step toward peace, Cade knew it would take time, patience, and more honesty than either pack was used to giving. But for the first time since his brother's death, he found himself hoping for something other than victory over an old enemy. He hoped, simply, for an ending to the fighting itself. At night, when the castle grew quiet and Finn was finally asleep down the hall, Cade would sit beside Elara by the fire, her hand resting easily in his, the way it had been meant to all those years before. The bond between them, so long stretched thin across years and distance, settled into something steady and whole. That night, for the first time in 10 years, Cade Ashworth slept without waking once, the ache in his chest finally, quietly, at rest.